Conditioning a racehorse is a matter of preserving the raw material, a healthy horse, while enhancing the animal's natural abilities through appropriate quality exercise. In the thoroughbred, except for the recent advent and growing use of high-speed treadmills, exercise is delivered and essentially controlled by exercise riders at the racetrack and the training center. While there are dozens of variables that must be closely controlled during thoroughbred conditioning, including aspects of nutrition, shoeing, basic health care, lameness intervention, and rehabilitation, on-track exercise is probably the most important, and the exercise rider is the key figure in delivering safe, effective exercise. In this video, we're going to examine exercise riding techniques in an attempt to sort out the good and the bad from the outright ugly. Essentially, we're looking at the subject in terms of maintaining a healthy, happy, under control horse. There is no doubt in our minds that a top exercise rider is worth his or her weight in gold, and that an ineffective one can ruin a valuable animal very quickly. There is no doubt, too, that the job of the exercise rider is tough, dangerous, and in many aspects unrewarding. Thoroughbreds coming to racing fitness are like kegs of dynamite with short fuses. Horses that have been mishandled in the past develop nasty habits. Many thoroughbreds at our tracks today suffer from injuries, sometimes severe, which make them emotionally unstable or subject to on-track breakdowns. Trainers have a tendency to disregard the thoughts or ideas of exercise riders and often resent suggestions that might help a horse and rider become a complementary team. Before we criticize or critique any exercise rider, we must first acknowledge the courage, strength, and determination of anyone who attempts to make a career of exercise riding. It's a tough, demanding job, one that few of us would ever attempt. Just as in any profession, though, there are the good, the bad, and the ugly in this one. Some riders are well trained, care deeply about what they're doing, and are fully capable of handling any eventuality that occurs in the saddle. Others are reasonably competent, but view their life's work as just a job, time in exchange for money. Others are outrageously incompetent, don't give a damn, and are a danger to the horse they are riding and every other horse and rider on the racetrack. Fortunately, these last are few and far between. The goal of this tape is to encourage those who fit or are trying to fit into the first category, to move a few from the second category to the first, and to eliminate as many of the third category from the racetrack as possible. If owners, trainers, and other exercise riders know what to look for and what to avoid in an exercise rider, then the quality of life should improve for all, especially the horses. Each time we look at a rider situation on this tape, we'll show it in real time and slow motion as often as is justified. Of course, you can play the tape back as often as you need to. The object is to allow you to develop an eye for a good rider and an eye for any number of the common problems your rider might have to overcome. In this way, you'll be able to spot the trouble from the rail of the racetrack and offer suggestions later. You can even videotape your rider and compare the results with this videotape for analysis. As always, our intent here is to deliver information, not entertainment. Nor are we interested in conveying the impression that all is well at the racetrack. We're simply interested in exploring for the truth, wherever that may lead. So let's have at it. No holds barred. This is the water skier, an ugly rider. He's lazy. He's leaning back on the horse's mouth, putting an iron mouth on the horse. The horse is pulling down because he's pulling up, and when the horse pulls down, it's not pulling forward. It's learning basically to lean on the bit, getting a hard mouth, pounding on the front legs. The rear legs are detached from the gallop. Later on, this horse is going to have an iron mouth. It's going to be a puller, and it's not going to have the forward motion that we're looking for in a racehorse. Instead, it'll be leaning on the bit, just like the rider is leaning on the bit right now. You'll notice that this rider is quite comfortable, very happy. He's going to give us a big smile. He doesn't belong on this horse. This is another ugly rider. Your proverbial sack of shit. This rider is bouncing up and down on the horse's back. His feet are sticking forward. He's basically taking a nice, comfortable ride for himself. But the horse is feeling this ride with every step. Notice how the horse is moving. Its head is in the air. Its front legs are climbing and then pounding into the ground. Its rear legs are not reaching far enough forward. They're trying to support the weight of the rider. Every time that rider's butt impacts the horse's back, the horse feels it and is trying to adjust to it. The horse is extremely aware of the rider's weight in this case. This is where a heavy rider doing this kind of work can severely injure a horse very quickly. When that horse's back bends down, it's supposed to bend upward slightly. When that horse's back bends down, all sorts of damage starts to take place, starting with sore muscles in the back, which eventually limit the motion of the horse, make those rear legs stab, throws extra concussion up into the hocks, and pretty soon you've got a hock sore horse, a butt sore horse, and a back sore horse. Eventually the vertebrae in the horse's back deteriorate and you've got a permanently injured animal. Plus, the horse's movement is compromised, and as he goes through mile after mile of this, his stride will not develop properly. This is a very ugly ride. Too bad you don't want this guy on your animal. This is a better looking rider. She's better positioned. She's up over the neck of the horse in the right place. Her balance is good. She's flexible at the shoulder, flexible at the hips, flexible at the knees. But she's leaning on the knuckles of her hands. The horse's head is high above the bit, not rounded, and so this horse is moving down the track a little stiffly. This rider could do a lot more with her hands. She's looking around a little bit and not paying much attention. She might be a better rider than this because she does have reasonably good position on the horse, and flexibility. It's unfortunate the way she's carrying her hands. She's resting on the withers of the horse with her hands, and therefore the bit is loose in the horse's mouth and not enough contact to make the horse try to round on the bit. Consequently, the horse's head is high, and this girl doesn't look as good as she could. When the horse isn't rounded on the bit, it tends to use its rear end less and kind of goes down the track a little bit choppy. And when we speed this up to regular motion, you'll see how the horse tends to chop, 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 chop down the track. This horse's head is too high. The rider's well balanced though, so that's a plus in her favor. Okay, what we have here is a fellow who's going to put on a good show for us. He's going to win this race. Now, unfortunately, who he is our water skier moving fast. And you can see that he's got quite a lot of yank on those lines. He's leaning back. Watch as he goes past this picture here. You can see that he's leaning way back. His knees are inflexible. He's not up over the horse. He's balanced rearward on those reins. And meanwhile, he's asking the horse for speed with the whip, and he's asking pretty dramatically. And what this means is that this horse will not know what's being asked. The kind of stride you get from this is a horse that climbs a little bit in front, tries to use the rear end a little bit, but spends more time climbing and trying to struggle away from the whip at the same time, fight the bit. And you'll end up with a horse that really doesn't like to go out on the racetrack and wants to get sour every time she thinks she's going to breeze. Again, this is aggressive, repressive riding. No good. Out of balance. Okay, I want to spend a couple minutes with this fellow. He's an excellent grade A rider. He's breezing a horse. But what I want to talk about is control. These horses, a race fit horse like this horse we're looking at right now, are, as I said in the beginning of this tape, kegs of dynamite waiting to go off. That means that from the time you hit the racetrack to the time you come off the track, you've got to be in absolute control of the animal. And while you watch this rider go by, one of the things you're going to see is that his hands on the horse are not as flexible as we might like to see in a horse that's exercising easier. He's got a firm grip on this horse. On the other hand, he's not unreasonably asking the horse to move forward. Basically, he is doing a controlled breeze, and he's doing it very well. That's the thing to keep in mind on the racetrack, is that racehorses are different than dressage horses. They're different than any other sport. You can't allow them to believe that they are in control of what's going on while you're out there moving at 35, 40 miles an hour. In this case, what we have is a rider and a horse moving perfectly together. The rider is perfectly balanced. The only thing the rider is doing is he has a good grip on the horse's mouth. Still, the horse is moving freely. The rear end is reaching way up underneath the girth. The front legs are striding out fine. It's a good moving combination, perfect combination. Watch these two move at speed. No lost motion, no inefficiency. This rider's a good rider doing a controlled breeze. Now here we have a Category 1 horse with a Category 2 rider. The horse is rounded, or trying to be rounded, on the bit, carrying its head just the way you want it to carry its head. It would do even better if the rider was doing something with his hands other than resting. The reins are loose and then tight and then loose and then tight. So this rider is not helping this horse along at all. Now another thing you'll see about this rider with another head-on shot is that he's an acey-deucey rider. The outside stirrup is higher than the inside stirrup. A lot of riders ride this way. It's bad for the horse. It leans too much weight on the inside left front leg, which normally is the one that goes bad first. Also, he'll lean into the withers of the horse with his upper leg occasionally, and that'll eventually cause soreness in the back. This rider is stiff-legged, stiff-kneed. He's got good motion from his hips, but his legs are rather stiff. He's not hurting this horse as much as some riders could, but this is not the best of rides, and this is a beautiful moving horse. If he was a better rider, they would look great together. Now here again, we've got a Category 2 rider. Just a little loose. The hands are right, reasonably right. The shoulders are a little bit loose. The elbows flop a little bit. But the butt is not exactly staying in sync with the horse's butt. What should happen is that the tailbone of the rider should go down and forward at about the same time that the croup of the horse goes down and forward. And instead what we've got here is sometimes in sync, sometimes out, but just a little bit loose overall. This rider is professional, trying hard. It's got the horse in reasonable. It's easy to look good going fast. We don't know how she'd look going slow, but she's got a good position. She's just a little bit too much motion on the back of the horse. Not too bad. A little too much motion. Here again is another Category 2, although this guy is pretty close. Again, just a little bit too much motion, and he's a little bit out of sync with his horse. He doesn't have enough butt motion. He's not bending his knees enough. Once in a while he does, once in a while he doesn't. He's just a little bit erratic. He doesn't have a real good grip on the horse either in terms of the horse's mouth. He's not talking to the mouth. His hands are not necessarily moving with the horse. They're sitting still, but he's carrying a loose rein nevertheless. A little too stiff in the butt and a little bit excess motion. He's standing a little tall, a little bit excess motion for a horse that's moving at a pretty good speed, as you'll see when we go into the real-time motion. This horse is cooking right along. This rider is probably not bothering the horse, but still, it's not a perfect ride. Control. Here's another ugly. This fella is loose as a goose. He's flapping his arms. He's got the horse's head jerked around on the left side. He's probably stronger on the right hand than he is on the left. He's sitting down in the saddle, coming down hard on the horse's back. The horse doesn't know what he's supposed to do. This guy is probably an older man that should have given up riding a long time ago. But believe me, out in the racetrack, you're going to see lots of this kind of person, and these guys are not good for your horse. This guy, look at the kind of mouth this guy's putting on this horse. No wonder the horse needs all this equipment. Pathetic. Worse than a sack of shit. This is as bad as you can get. This kid's pretty good. Real steady on the animal, moving with the animal, well balanced. His only problem is a similar problem to the rest, and a lot of them at the racetrack, in that he is riding high on the outside. Now this acey-deucey problem is something that's going to be very difficult for you or anybody to combat at the racetrack, because everybody likes to ride like that. It's not necessary to stay on or maintain balance to ride acey-deucey, but it's bad for the horse. This fella here, though, is reasonably under control. He's got reasonably good motion. He's flexible in his knees, flexible in his ankles, flexible in his butt, and he's got his hands in the right place, moving with the horse. Here we have either a weak or a tired rider. This rider can barely sit on the top of that horse. Kind of a weak belly. What's happening is she's fighting, or he is fighting, the motion of the horse, and is all over the place on the back of the horse. And of course the horse doesn't like it. This is a low grade 2. Okay, again we've got a category 2 here. This fellow is an acey-deucey rider, high on the outside, low on the inside. He's stiff in the hip area, standing straight up on the horse, and watch how he's carrying those reins. Now, this type of a rider is tending to balance himself with the reins on the horse's mouth, and that means that when the horse's head moves forward, his hands don't necessarily move forward unless he's in balance. This is not quite what we're looking for. Again, that acey-deucey. Horse is on the wrong lead coming around that turn. And watch him depend on his hands to keep his balance. Not quite. Now here's a rider that's hard to describe until you see him really go in front of us, but the first thing you can notice is that he seems to be very, very flexible and easy on this horse. He bends at the knee very well. He bends at the butt. His shoulders bend. He seems to be extremely flexible, like rubber. But notice how far back on the horse he is as he goes by us. He's way, way, way behind the horse. And he's got a very tight grip on a horse that may or may not need this tight a grip. His knees are wide open. Horses that move slow, of course, can make a rider look not as good as he really is. In this case, though, we have a rider who is a grade 2 rider, even though he's got all the flexibility in the world. He's just way far back on the horse, and possibly a little bit too much grip on the mouth. As far as what this does to the horse, it's hard to say. The horse looks pretty calm and collected here, a little bit too collected, but moving reasonably well, reasonably comfortably. So he's not doing a lot of damage to this horse, but too bad. Now this is a grade 1 rider. The big difference between this rider and the last one is that he is in the right position on the back of the horse. He's up over the withers where he's supposed to be. He's a little bit tall, but notice that his feet are steady in the stirrups. He's got flexibility in the knees, flexibility in the butt. His hands are in the right place. They're dealing with the mouth of the horse correctly. The horse can stretch out. He's not all choked up. The rider is not leaning on this horse for rest. He's actually at work. He's doing work. He's keeping himself in position. This is difficult to do, but still completely flexible. In other words, we've got the flexibility of the last rider, but we've also got position, and we've also got the kind of hands we're looking for. This is a grade 1 rider. This is what you want your riders to look like. This guy is doing virtually everything the right way. Take a look at him. Okay, this fellow has one problem that leads to a multiple group of problems. He's got the stirrup iron at the back of his boot right in front of the heel. That's called having the stirrup home. And what this prevents is his ability to grasp the horse with his legs. Consequently, his legs are all over the place. The legs move back and forth. Not only that, but he has to find his balance somewhere, and where he's finding it is on the horse's neck. He's leaning on his hands. You can see his elbows accordioning in and out. That's the sign of a person that's leaning on the horse's neck for support. Now this is a good-looking horse, but he's not reaching as far forward with his rear legs as he could because of the rider sitting high and has the pressure on the reins like that. The rider's not all bad, but he's a grade 2 on a grade 1 animal. Good-looking horse. Okay, here's a rider moving from a walk to a trot. And he's going to post. He's trying to get his body in sync with the horse. The horse is moving a little bit too slow for that to do very well at this point, but now as the horse picks up, the rider gets into sync. He looks good. His hands are in the right place. His body's in the right position. He's moving very well. He's very in control of the horse. The horse knows it's under control. Here go 2 horses galloping by. This horse stays calm, gets a little bit enthusiastic, but is perfectly under control. This is a nice ride at the trot. Riders who don't post aren't any good for you. Okay, now here we have a case of an incompetent rider who wants to do good but can't do good, at least under these circumstances. This horse wants to go to Florida. The girl wants her to go to Kansas. And what's happening is the horse is under control of its own steering mechanism, and the girl does not have control of the horse. Now, as she goes by us here, we'll look at her riding technique. Her legs are loose. She's trying to hold on with her knees, with her thighs. She's got flexibility, but basically she's going against the horse. She's got a hold on the reins but cannot control this animal, cannot steer this animal. One of the reasons is because she doesn't really have any sure leverage. She's not in position to control this horse. Meanwhile, the horse is heading for Florida. Now let's just see if she can get her straightened out. This is not good for the horse. The horse should be moving straight forward, always in line. This control should have been established when the horse got onto the racetrack. Instead, we've got a horse that pretty soon looks like it's going to head for New York. It's going to turn around and go the other way. This horse is a danger to every other horse out there, and you can see that as she goes by some of these riders, they're going to steer clear of her. They don't want to get too close to what she's doing, because this horse could go out of control in any direction at any minute. Obviously, the rider has no control whatsoever. And let's watch. It doesn't look like she's going to get her straightened out. In fact, this horse probably is still heading for Florida today, although we haven't kept track. Here we have a little different situation. This horse wants to go to Toledo. The horse is backtracking. Usually after doing some kind of significant work on the racetrack, the horse is kind of fired up. A little bit difficult to control, as is in the case here. Now this rider is trying a number of techniques to try to establish control of the horse. He's not quite getting it done. I think that he's purposely got the horse's head turned toward the rail. When you turn the horse's head toward the rail, it tends not to run off with you. This horse is on the muscle, wants to go, wants to stretch out. So this guy's having to fight with this horse to establish control, and it appears that he's going to get it done. At least he's got the horse prevented from darting out into the middle of oncoming traffic. You'll see this in backtracking quite a bit. Ideally, though, backtracking should be just as important as going the right way of the track, and the horse should be going straight anyway. So let's hope that this fellow gets his control established at some point in time. Hands are in the right place, legs are in the right place, balance is good, looks pretty good otherwise. Sitting down on the horse like that sometimes causes the horse to relax. This lady carries or rides a long stirrup. She's got her heels turned in to the horse. She's very stiff in her knees and in her hips and in her lower back. She seems to be partially balancing herself on the reins. The horse is not rounded on the bit. Instead, every stride she lands on his back and pushes that back down. And eventually, over mile after mile after mile, this has got to soar the horse up. Mile after mile of this kind of work is bad for the horse. One thing to notice as this horse goes by is the thickness of the lower neck and the lightness of the rear end. That's a characteristic shape of a horse that's had a lot of mileage of this type. It's unfortunate. Now sometimes a horse can make a rider look bad. This is a tough horse. This rider is bracing against the pull of this horse, partially with his leg. He's leaning back a little bit. Notice that his legs are straight up and down. Notice too that he's acey-deucey, which is bad. He's a little bit stiff in the lower back, but his knees are flexing well, his butt's flexing well. He's got a firm grip on the horse, but this horse appears that it needs a firm grip. This guy would look better on a better horse. Not bad, 2+. Another tough horse. This fellow is not as bad as your typical water skier, but he still is pulling up and the horse is pulling down. It's not the right way to go. He'd probably do better on a better horse. To demonstrate what's wrong with a hobby horse canter. First thing to know, though, on this rider is that he is an acey-deucey rider. His lower legs are loose, sliding back and forth on the horse. It appears that he's balancing himself on the balls of his feet or the rise of his foot and not with his thigh or with his calves. He's real slippery on the horse with his legs. As the horse moves forward, he leans back and kind of pulls on the reins. So every time the horse tries to move forward, he gets a jerk in the mouth with this guy's hands. Sometimes, now once in a while, the guy sits up and does well, like he's doing right here. But more often than not, this guy is kind of all over the horse. The trouble with hobby horse cantering is that these horses tend to come down hard, especially in front. Don't use their rear end and tend to come down hard in front. You can see this horse clunk, 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 clunk down the track. That's uncomfortable. It's a lot of wear and tear on the joints, especially with a young horse. Not a very good ride. This is a 2. Now this horse is moving pretty fast. We're looking at the red rider. The rider's doing a pretty darn good job. Notice that the stability of the lower legs. Notice the flexion of the knees, the flexion of the butt, the steadiness of the hands. I'd like to see a little bit more mouth contact on this horse. The horse leans forward and the reins catch him. Still, the rider's hands are tending to move with the horse. The horse is really stretched out and rolling here, as you'll see when we speed this up. Like this guy's head. His head is a little bit high. His shoulders are flexible. His butt is flexible. His lower back is flexible. Pretty steady in the saddle. Again, we've got a fast-moving horse here, as you can see here. This is about a 2:30 rate. Here's a horse moving too slow, but with a good rider. This rider is a grade 1. Flexible at the knees, very steady feet, feet in the right position, grabbing with his calves, hands working with the horse. Upper body is stable, not slopping around. But again, the horse is moving too slow. Horses that move like this and teach their legs to move like this, mile after mile, hundreds of miles of this type of work, learn to canter real well and don't learn that open lope stride, that 4-beat stride that they're going to be using in a race. And consequently, let's say this horse is a young horse. If he goes through a couple hundred miles of this and then has to suddenly breeze 3/8 of a mile or a quarter of a mile, his legs are not going to be ready for that. His neuromuscular coordination is not going to be ready for that type of breeze. So the more miles you do like this, the worse it is for this animal. The rider could use his hands a little bit more to stretch the animal out. Notice again how hard the horse is coming down in front. Bang, 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 bang. You don't need that, especially on a young horse. Meanwhile, pretty good rider. Nice looking rider. Here's our hobby horse example about the 3rd time around the track. Now the horse is at an open lope and the horse looks a lot more comfortable moving. The rider still has his faults. He's got a loose lower leg. The lower leg is sliding back and forth on the horse. He's a little bit long in the stirrups. The knee is inflexible. Not much flex in the lower back. His hands are doing as well as they were doing before. He's carrying his head a little high. But just look at the horse. Now the horse is doing a lot better, a lot more fluid motion. This is what we're looking for. Now here's a really good rider doing a reasonably good job on a horse that would prefer to be a Western pleasure horse. The horse wants to carry its head low. The fellow is trying to get that head where it belongs. But he's not jerking the horse around. He's not fighting with the horse. He's just gently trying to persuade the animal to do a little bit better job with its body position. Maybe the horse likes to go like this, and maybe it's best that the horse goes like this. The horse is moving nicely and fluidly. Notice the balance of the rider, the flexion of the knees and the hips and the lower back, position of the feet. This is a probable case of an ex-water ski ridden horse that now is in the hands of a competent rider trying to straighten him out a little bit. Good looking rider, reasonably moving horse at this point in time. Now you see this quite often at the racetrack. This is a horse being ponied. The reasons for ponying a horse are a number. One may be that the horse is not yet ready for a rider. More likely, though, the stable is short a rider today, or the horse can't stand a rider because it might be sore. Or you've got a horse that has thrown some riders, and the riders don't want to get up on it, and so they go out and exercise it this way as a way to avoid accidents on the track. Ponying is not good. If you'll notice, as the horse goes along, its neck is creaked over onto the lap of the rider. This is actually a pretty well behaved ponying situation. The rider is doing a good job. The horse is behaving itself. This is not the common situation that you'll see with a ponying horse. Horses being ponied are usually going every which way out there, and many of them get loose and run around the racetrack and do themselves damage. Still, this horse right now is doing itself some damage. It's not running, it's not moving appropriately. Its neck is cocked to the side. It may get used to going like that. There's always the possibility of some interference going on between the pony horse and the horse being led, and that can cause trouble. They have to go slow when they're doing this. They can't go fast, and so this exercise is non-productive in terms of what you're actually getting done. Notice that the horse is not moving the way you want your racehorse to move down the racetrack. Ponying is not a good idea. This just happens to be a pretty peaceful situation here. Now here's a situation that happens very often on a racetrack. The girl takes a look to her left. Here comes a horse breezing by, and her horse wants to take off. Now, this girl does pretty good. I don't like the way she's sitting. Her feet are wiggling a little bit down there in the bottom, a little bit loose for me. She looks like she's hitting the back of the horse with her butt a little bit too hard, but that may be because she's wearing that shirt and we really can't see how she is hitting that saddle. Nevertheless, she does have good control on an animal that wants to get out there and play a little bit, and she's very aware of what's going on around her. She can see that horse coming. She knows she better wake this horse up and say, hey, here comes trouble, or I'm ready for trouble if you're going to give it to me. And sure enough, the horse says, oh boy, I want to race too. And it tries to get away, but the girl's got good control, got good balance, stays right on that bucking bronco, and keeps the horse under control. Kind of important. Here at first glance we have another water skier, and I don't particularly like this rider, but he's not as bad as they can be. The things to know about him, or just to watch about him, is that he is reasonably flexible in his knees, in his lower legs. He's carrying his feet about right. He's a little bit upright. He's a little bit straight in the saddle, standing up too high, not enough flexion in the butt. And he does occasionally lean into those reins or lean back on those reins. But he's exceptionally well balanced. The rider really is not doing a lot to limit the motion of the animal. The animal does occasionally get out there and stretch and has no problem getting knocked in the mouth for doing that. Still, he's an acey-deucey, upright, water skiing type, careless rider who is liable to just go right over the top of the head of this horse if the horse has to stop or turn or do any of the tricks that horses are liable to do on the racetrack. Better than most water skiers, but still a grade 3 plus. And here comes our sack of manure. These fellows are plentiful, especially out in the Californian tracks. You'll see a lot of guys riding like this. A lot of South American riders ride like this. This fellow doesn't even have his feet in the stirrups. He's just basically a bareback rider with a saddle. And the trouble with this kind of a rider is that he comes down hard on the horse's back every time the horse hits the ground. Plus, he has no balance. He's leaning back on the reins, dragging the horse's mouth back when the horse wants to move his head forward. If the horse does misbehave, he may or may not retain control of the animal. Certainly he's not ready for anything to happen. Maybe he thinks he's on a very controllable horse, but with those blinkers on, this horse would appear that this horse has had some trouble behaving in the past. Again, notice how far back he's sitting. His legs are flopping around. He's got no grip on the horse whatsoever. He's banging down the middle of the back. The horse cannot arch its back, cannot use its rear end properly. There they are at speed, clunking down the track. Oof, oof, oof. This is the kind of fellow you don't want to see on your racehorse. He belongs anywhere else but on the back of your racehorse. And there's thousands of them. Here's a fellow trying to outmuscle a horse that he can't outmuscle, leaning back on the reins. Wrong guy for this horse. Now here's a fellow that's got some interesting technique. Notice how he can bring that horse to a stop on a dime with a long rein. He could lasso a cow with that rein. Now watch him as he pulls away and rides off into the sunset. The horse is under absolute psychological, telepathic control. An excellent example of top horsemanship in action. Here's a good rider. This is a grade 1 rider. This is California, and in general you'll see more of the top class riders and often more of the lowest class riders out there, and not too much in between. This fellow is extremely well balanced. His feet are steady, not flopping around. They're positioned correctly. He's not digging into the horse's ribs with his heels. He's got flexibility in his knees. He's got flexibility in his butt, his lower back, his shoulders. His hands are chilly on the horse. He's not moving, and that's one of the things to think of when you got a horse that's race ready. When you're out there working with a horse, you don't really want to do too much in the way of moving if you can avoid it. The more you move, the more the horse gets confused. This guy sits a horse real pretty. The horse and he make a very pretty picture. And the more of these guys you can put on the horse, the better off you're going to be. Now here's a good rider trying to establish control of a horse with a kind of a hard mouth that lugs down on the bit. The problem with this situation is that the horse going around a turn has his head turned to the outside and is experiencing probably damage and probably learning the wrong way to go around a turn. If the rider had taken a little bit more rein and maybe added a figure 8 bit to this horse, rigging to this horse, then perhaps this control could be established without turning the horse's head to the outside around that turn. Notice as he finishes the turn, the head straightens out and even turns a little bit more to the inside. A good rider trying to establish control of a horse that's difficult to control. Here's another example of a horse that can't bend around a turn, and unfortunately in this case it's coupled with a rider who doesn't know how to ride. Again, we're in California and you get kind of the low of the low and the high of the high. This guy is a grade 3 and there's 100 things wrong with what he's doing. Let's get back to where he's starting over again for us, but you can see what name everything that can go wrong, and this guy's doing it. He's sitting down on the horse, flopping down the horse's back. He's acey-deucey. His legs are all over the place. His hands are jerking up on the horse's mouth every time the horse tries to take a step forward. Just a big, bouncy, sloppy, ugly rider. Here they are at speed. This guy looks a little bit like Lee Marvin. And here is a California water skier. And this is a true, genuine, honest-to-God water skier on a nice horse. This is a good-looking animal. This is a serious racehorse here. But here we've got a water skier who decides that he's going to be stiff-legged and stand way back and just hang on to that horse for dear life. And he's putting a mouth on that horse that you can't believe. Somebody else on this horse is going to have a lot of trouble because of what this clown is doing to the horse's mouth right now. Notice how this horse comes around the turn, though. The horse likes to turn. I mean, he likes what he's doing. He's just really enjoying moving like a racehorse. This is an honest-to-God racehorse. In the right hands, this horse could beat anybody. Good-looking animal. Awful-looking rider. Look at that. Here they are at speed. The horse looks great. The rider is a water skier. Here is a gorgeous rider. Another nice looking horse. This rider is flexible at the knees, at the ankles, at the hips, at the shoulders. Got a nice hold on the horse. Firm control. Knows where he's going, knows what he's doing. Moving in perfect sync with the animal. Horse has got his head turned out a little bit. Good looking. Here's another good rider. Again, now this guy's got a horse that he's having trouble controlling, but he's exerting control, and he's exerting control the way you have to on a horse like this. He'd do better if he had his hands further up on the reins, a little bit lower on the horse's neck, and a running martingale, kind of like the last rider we saw. Still a relatively tough horse, difficult to control. That'll put a mouth on a horse. You've got to be careful with this kind of thing. Best bet is to use the physical restraints necessary before you try to outmuscle the horse. A fellow with pretty much the same problem, but who is solving it in the wrong way, or who is starting out imbalanced in the wrong way. He's leaning back. He's got one hell of a grip on that horse's mouth. He's way, way, way behind the center of gravity of the horse with his butt. One of our advisors on this tape says this is castration by cantle. He's so far back on the horse that his butt's behind the saddle. This horse needs a figure 8. Once he gets his mouth open that wide, he's got control of the bit. He can lock it behind his teeth, and he becomes extremely difficult to control. A figure 8 would solve this problem and help the rider out a lot. Still, the rider's got some things to learn about how far back he's sitting. Have you ever wondered why your horse doesn't like to come out of the starting gate or gets nervous going into the starting gate? Take a look at these three. Now this is not happening because of the horse's lack of ability coming out of the gate. It's instead the imbalance of the riders in the starting gate. They're not ready for what's going to happen. And consequently it takes them 3 or 4 strides to get the horses under control. Now just watch this. We're going to do this frame by frame. There's going to be a little bit of jitter in this frame by frame because that's the way our cameras work. We're using shuttered cameras, and sometimes you catch it in the middle of the shutter. But watch what happens to these horses as they come out of the gate. The one on the far right of the screen is going to come out fine. The one in the middle and the one on your left are going to just be yanked around unbelievably. Now let's take a good look at the one on the left to start with. Right away comes out of the gate sideways. The rider's about ready to fall off. Look at the left front leg of that horse on the ground right now. It's taking a bend, but when that right front watch what it does. Watch, there it is. Okay, see the twisting pressure on that leg has got to do damage. Now this guy goes out of the picture. Look, he's almost ready to fall off the horse. Okay, this horse is going to go out of the picture, and now start concentrating on the horse in the middle. Notice what's happening to this guy. He's being wrenched around. The rider is afraid he's going to go into the horse to his left. And so watch the horse's mouth. Watch the rider's hands. Watch what happens here, frame by frame. I mean, it's gruesome. These animals experience this kind of a thing 2 or 3 times in their life, and they're all done. They don't want to see the starting gate again. Watch. Look at this. This is not the horse's fault. This is not the horse's fault. He's about ready to step on a tendon there. The rear leg is going to come up and try to grab that right front. But nevertheless, this is not the fault of the horse. It's the fault of the rider. Now, one of the things we want to look at in horses coming out of the starting gate is this thing called the rotary gallop. And we're seeing here that this horse going through a rotary gallop right now. The left rear hit first, the right rear hit next. Now the right front is hitting, and the left front will hit next right there. Okay, that's a rotary gallop. Left rear, right front, left front. And a rotary gallop sets up the possibility of interference. Now this horse gets out of the rotary gallop right away, but the next horse you're going to see is in a rotary gallop throughout the pictures that we're taking here. Now first the back legs come out simultaneously, but now he's in a rotary gallop right now, starting with a right rear, left front, right front. That's a rotary gallop, and it sets up an interference with the last front leg to hit the ground and the recovering rear leg right there and there and there and there. That's a rotary gallop. It's a very costly gallop in terms of energy, and it's liable to cause interference and damage to the horse. Now, here's our group of 3 coming out of the gate, completely out of control. Here's a horse that's in a rotary gallop coming out of the gate, but under control and going straight and starting out of the starting gate like a horse should. This is the rider's fault in both cases. Now, here's a good example of a good ride and a nice smooth lead change coming out of a corner. Okay, the rider is well balanced, moving with the horse. Everything is perfect, perfect balance with the rider. So we got no problem there. Now notice that the left fore is on the lead in this horse, and as he goes through and he passes this black striped post here, he's going to change his leads. And he'll do this in front first, right there, and then the behind legs change next. Now we'll come down to frame by frame for you so you can see this step by step. Okay, here he is coming out of the turn. This is the appropriate place to change leads, just as you're coming out of the turn and heading into the straightaway. You want to rest that left front leg. Right now, the right rear is hitting the ground first. This horse is in a diagonal gallop, by the way, and most of them are, most of the time. Right rear, left rear. And here comes, he's going to hit down with his right front next, and then the left front. So that's a diagonal gallop that you're seeing right there. Now the next step, the next stride, is going to be very similar, except that the front legs are going to change and the back legs will stay the same. Here comes the right rear, and the next leg down is obviously going to be the left rear. But now watch what happens in the front legs. For just a second here, we're going to have a partial rotary gallop. We've got the left front coming down, and it's going to hit next. Right here. Okay, now here comes the right front is going to come down, and for that stride right there, we have a rotary gallop. In other words, two legs on the same side hitting one in front of the other. Now, at this point, the rear legs are going to hesitate, and the rear legs are going to change. Right here is the place where you'll get interference. But in this case, this horse is going to hold back that right rear leg and avoid the right front. And he's coming down with the left rear now. And he's going to put himself in a complete diagonal gallop. Left rear, left front, right front. And that's the typical lead change. That's the way a lead change occurs coming out of a turn in a well-controlled horse. The horse has got complete control. He avoids the interference by hesitating with that rear leg. Now see if you can see it in slow motion, not stop motion. He's going through, and right here the front legs change, the rear legs change. Okay, there it was. Now here it is in speed, and if you can see this change, you're seeing real good. There. Here's another lead change. He's in a diagonal gallop. The horse is moving properly. The rider is riding correctly. This is going to be easy to see. Right there. There was the lead change. Right there. See, it's pretty easy to see. Now we're going to take this guy in slow motion and show you this again. Here's the right rear, left rear. The horse is in a diagonal gallop. Right front, left front is coming down right now. Okay. The rear leg are going to hit the same way. Right rear, left rear. Left front, right front. That's a diagonal gallop for one stride. Now here's the rear legs coming up. The right rear wants to interfere with the right front. However, the horse is hesitating with that rear leg, and he's going to drop it down first, or he's going to drop the left rear down first. And there it is. And then the right rear is going to hit next. And the horse will stay on the same stride in front, so we'll have our diagonal gallop back again. That's what a lead change is supposed to look like. And that's the danger of a rotary gallop when you're in it. Now here's a fella on the wrong lead and changing to the left lead, or what we would call the correct lead that he should have been on in the turn. Now he changes into a straightaway. Here it is, the wrong lead going to the correct lead at the wrong time. Any rider that does this too often on your horse is going to get him really confused. The horse has to go around the turn on the left lead. This horse is on the right lead. Now he's on the left lead coming out of the turn, but it's too late. He should have been in the left lead all the way around the turn. Too bad. Bad ride. Here's a nice horse. Bad rider. See if you can figure out why. Here's a rank horse and a rank rider. Neither one of them under control. This rider and his buddy, who both have horses out of control, are going to do damage to these animals eventually. One way or another, they're going to cause trouble. The horse is out of control, the rider's out of balance. He's not trying to bring the horse under control. It just means trouble in the end. Now this fellow looks like he came out of oil country. As you'll see as he goes around, he looks a little bit like one of those Oklahoma oil rigs pumping away. But actually he's not too bad. He's got the horse on the wrong lead coming around the turn. That's unfortunate. However, he's quite flexible on the back of the horse. His shoulders are flexible, his butt's flexible, his knees are flexible, his feet are in the right place, hands are in the right place. He's just got a little bit too much overall motion for my taste. Again, it's disgusting to see a horse on the wrong lead coming around a turn. Too bad about that, but this kid's pretty gentle on the horse's mouth. Now here are two horses coming out of the gate, reasonably under control. The horse toward us is in a diagonal gallop. The horse away from us is in a rotary gallop. Theoretically, they're coming out just the way they're supposed to. Scientifically, they say that the rotary gallop is a faster accelerating gallop than the diagonal gallop is, but on down the road a bit, the diagonal gallop is more efficient and less tiring, and the diagonal gallop should catch up to the rotary gallop, and that's what's happening in this picture, although this is too early in the race for that to really make a difference. Here are four horses coming out of the starting gate, three of which we can actually see. Two of them are going to be doing rotary gallops. One is going to be doing a diagonal gallop. See if you can find which are which. Okay, now I'm going to tell you. The horse nearest to us, the one coming out of the 8-hole, is in a rotary. The black horse that goes out in front is in a rotary. The gray horse in the middle of those two is in a diagonal. Here's a rider with no knee flexibility. And without the knee flexibility, you get those feet on the bottom wiggling back and forth, sawing around at the horse's ribs. Here's a rider that just can't put it all together. He's got a horse that's misbehaving on him. He's trying. He's leading way back on the reins on the mouth of the horse. He wants to water ski on this horse, but the horse won't even let him do that. It's a battle royal. The rider's losing and the horse is losing. You don't need this happening on your racehorse. Here comes a perfect ride. It's a breeze. Riders find it easier to look good in a breeze. The horse is on the correct lead. The rider's almost motionless on the horse. But if you look closely as she goes by, you've got flexibility in the knees, you've got flexibility in the butt, you've got the hands doing what they're supposed to do. She's got perfect balance, perfect position. The horse is moving freely like it's supposed to move. It's a good looking ride. Now watch this rider again. This is perfection. This is what you want to see. And this horse is moving and enthusiastic and pleased to be moving. Here's a dumbass. At least he's on the right lead. We're talking about the guy in red looking over his shoulder, not paying attention. Now he starts paying attention a little bit. He's trying to get his balance. There he goes. Now he's got his balance. Straight-legged, leaning back on the reins, butchering the horse's mouth. Now he's going to try to ride correctly for a minute here. Whoop, nope, can't do that. Can't stay balanced. Now he's going to try to ride correctly again. No good. Here's another idiot. This is another water skier. And a true water skier. No attempt at balance. Just going to lean back on this horse. Rip his mouth apart. Take a little rest up there because he's got another 20 horses to ride this morning. Big long reach on the reins. This is your real genuine water skier. Useless. Another inept rider. He's on the wrong lead for one thing, coming around that turn. Great education this horse is getting. The rider, you'll see, is not balanced. He's just grabbing the horse up to get his own balance. His legs are loose on the horse. He's not gripping with his calves. Leaning way back, butt popping down that saddle, breaking the horse's back down. Not a water skier, but pretty close to it. Again, not what we're looking for in a rider. Notice the wrong lead. Let's just see how long it takes this horse to get out of that lead. There he goes. Now he's in the left lead. So the horse is on the right lead for going down the turn. Unfortunately, he's headed down the straightaway. Meanwhile, the rider is just a sack of shit. Not as bad as some, but again, you don't want him on your horse. This is a reasonably good rider on the wrong lead coming around the turn. Horse is moving slow. Still, you don't want him on the wrong lead coming around a turn. The rider's well balanced. He's got flexible knees. He's got flexible hips. His hands are in the right place. But one of the things that he's not doing is maintaining control over the horse's head. The horse wants to twist its head. He's trying, but he's not getting it done, at least in this sequence. Hopefully on down the road, this horse and rider get along a little bit better. Right now, the horse isn't moving properly. Reasonably well-balanced rider, though. Another horse moving slow. This is a nice rider, a kind rider. This horse is not having any problems with this rider. He's got flexibility at the knees, flexibility at the butt. His hands are moving with the horse. The horse is comfortable, reasonably comfortable. This is a better ride than the last, but these last two riders are pretty good, pretty competent riders. This guy could use a little bit longer stirrup, maybe 4 or 5 inches longer. His stirrups are in breezing position, and maybe he's going to breeze this horse, but right now, going slow, they're a detriment to him. Here's a rider that's a little stiff in the knees. He's got good flexibility in the shoulders. His hands are moving with the horse. His butt's moving with the horse. He's just a little bit stiff in the knees. Otherwise, a competent ride. Easy on the horse. He's not leaning back on those reins. And here's a fellow who is. Look how tied up this horse is. He's got draw reins on him. The draw reins are there so the boy can rest. He's leaning back. He could probably go to sleep on this horse, and the horse and he would never know the difference. The draw reins are probably helping this horse move as nicely as he is under these conditions. The upward pull of the reins that the rider is exerting are not pulling the horse's mouth up because of the draw reins. The draw reins are pulling the mouth backward, so the horse is moving better than normal. Here's an acey-deucey rider riding a crooked horse. He's on the right lead, or the correct lead. That's the left lead. But he's leaning back on the horse's mouth, leaning back in the saddle, kind of a rear seat to this guy, making his balance occur with his hand on the mouth of the horse. Now here we got the Leaning Tower of Pisa. This is a horse that's trying to make the turn. He's on the correct lead. He's trying to make the turn, but the fella is leaning the wrong way. And of course, he's a water skier. So when he goes around a turn, standing up like that straight, he wants to fall off to the outside. The horse wants to make the turn. The rider is keeping his balance by twisting the horse's neck around. Too bad. Keep this guy off your animals. When I first started in the horse racing business, an old talented horseman named Curly Smart gave me my best lesson in horsemanship. He said, "Sit on that bench over there, keep your mouth shut, and just watch those horses out on that track. All your questions will eventually be answered if you just sit there and watch. I didn't believe him, but I started watching. And I've been watching for what seems to be a long, long time now. I've concluded that Curly was right. Slowly, hour by hour, you begin to develop a picture in your mind, a picture of a horse that's moving beautifully, without effort, with enthusiasm for his life's work. Once that picture is formed, you can compare it with all the other horses you see every day, and you can accurately gauge what's right and what's wrong about the way the animals are moving. You can even begin to guess the reasons why the picture isn't right. Slow motion video is a godsend in this regard because racehorse motion happens fast, and the actions and reactions of the riders get lost in a blur of motion. All the footage on this tape was taken with a Canon A1 camera, available for under $1,000. With it, Charlie and I videotape riders before we hire them. We're able to take long, close looks at their good and bad points before we put them on our horses. Hopefully this tape has dissected a wide enough variety of riding techniques that a picture of the perfect exercise rider is beginning to develop in your mind, in both fast and slow motion. The very best advice I can give you now is to keep watching this tape and keep watching horses on the racetrack. Soon you'll develop an eye for the horse that is fluid in its motion, an eye for the horse and rider team that flow together in perfect unison. Your picture may eventually be different from mine. You may notice nuances that I don't. But there is no question that we'll both be able to tell the good riders from the bad and the outright ugly. That's the goal of this tape, and I hope it works for you.